say that now. Where do the external and internal carotids give rise to each other? And the answer is about 2 fingers down, about 2 fingers down from the angle of the ramus of the mandible. This is where they split. Internals now going to the head. Where do they finish? Back on the outside again. The external carotids then supply all of these structures on the outside of the head, and you'll learn their branches. I'll teach you an acronym. Sometimes a little fat or picante makes super tacos. And you will learn all the branches of the external carotid that way. You hear super tacos at the end of that? The superficial temporal artery. It's the last piece. It's the end of the road. The supraorbital artery, the superficial temporal, this is the end of the road, and they join together on the frontalis, on the frontal bone. So this place where they split, we'll talk a lot about. The carotid sinus has cranial nerves there that are very influential for breathing and blood pressure. It's a very important location. And so we'll keep returning to that. This is your first exposure to it. And so I show you here where they're coming off the heart. You do not need to memorize the brachiocephalic junction. But I expect you at this point to know, as we begin anatomy, if you look at blood vessels, a lot of times you're going to find that they join forces. You don't end. The blood supply doesn't just end. It is actually joined with another blood supply, and we call this ANAST, an anastomosing blood vessel. It anastomoses. It connects with blood coming from another place. And we'll just keep seeing this. We'll see it on the bottom of the brain, see it around the shoulders, see it around the hips, see it supplying the heart, we'll see it supplying the intestines. In other words, there's multiple ways. If you're on Miss Frizzle's bus and you're driving out to the liver, there's more than one way to get there. You can get there by way of the celiac trunk, but you can also get there by way of the sphere mesenteric artery. There's more than one way to get there because the blood systems are connected. First illustration right here as we begin the head dissection. Supraorbital, superficial temporal arteries. All right. Now, to the muscles. So the blood vessels are gone on this picture. It's time to learn the muscles. A word about origins and insertions here. You will be expected at some point in your life to learn origins and insertions. No doubt. It's coming. Many anatomists prefer to call muscle attachments proximal and distal attachments, especially when they're referring to muscle attachments on the upper and lower extremities, arms and legs. When you say proximal and distal, that's what I normally think. Proximal and distal, those are normally anatomy words used in relationship to the shoulders and the hips. It doesn't mean it's the only place you can use it, but really it's the one that makes the most sense, proximal and distal. Now, I always have a decision to make. I make it every year. And I always make the same decision. What are you going to make these kids learn for the muscle attachments? There are 206 bones, and you know those, as well as many pieces and parts of those bones, and holes that pass through them, and fossa, and tuberosities, and processes, etc. You know these. There are 640 muscles, and many of them have more than 2 attachments. The external, all the obliques, external, internal, transverse, they have attachments in about 4 or 5 places, most of them. Most of the muscles of the abdomen do. And so if you do the math on that, you see where this is going? Say, conservative estimate, 600 times 3. You're talking about 1,800 different data points, and really no one can be expected to do that. You might be told, at some point in your life, well, you have to learn all this. Okay. But that's inhuman. You can't do that. And I will illustrate this to you in your second lab test. You think that you know all of these attachments, but you don't. You can't remember all that. This is why you made a big high grade on the first test, because on the second one, you can't get all of them. And that's fine. Everybody still has a good grade, because I have to, it's part of my life mission to make at least one day of your lives in anatomy extremely miserable. You have to have this one miserable day in the lab doing this. So what are we going to do with these attachments? How are we going to do this? Here's the wave 1 approach. I have taken many, not all, but many of the attachments that can be found in the tables of your textbook and the tables of your lab manuals, and I have simplified them, in my opinion, to words that can be remembered long term. I find that if students memorize large groupings of factoids that don't have context or meaning, by the time they leave me a year later, all of that's gone. But if we try to describe things in more general terms, it is much more likely that you will remember them. And later in your life, when you're required to learn all the nitty-gritty details, you'll have a framework to do that in. So, for example, instead of telling you exactly where on the zygomatic these two muscles are attached, because it's not the same place, I just say zygomatic bone. But if you know that the zygomaticus muscles go from the zygomatic bone to the corner of the lip, okay, well now you can figure out where that muscle is. But that is a very dumbed down description of where it's attached. So there will be no which one of these is the origin and which one of these is the insertion. There will be no which one of these is the proximal and which one of these is the distal attachment. That won't happen. The way I will ask you is, where is the muscle attached? A lot of times on an exam, if you know where the muscle is, if you can touch it, and you know the skeleton, you can pretty much figure out where it's attached. So that's what I have done, and what I've tried to do in talking about the attachments of the muscles. For me, it's not origin insertion, it's not proximal distal attachment, it is simply muscle attachments. Where does it go? From where to where does the muscle go? All right, so we start at the top. The first one is called the frontalis. It is connected to the occipitalis in the back, a large muscle called the epicranius. It is one muscle in many textbooks. The muscle frontalis is connected to the back. The muscle in the occipital bone called the occipitalis, and we know this is the epicranius. Now, I illustrated this for you already when we talked about tendons and ligaments. The tendon sheet that connects the frontalis to the occipitalis is called the gallia aponeurotica. It's dense, regular connective tissue. It's a tendon, but it's really a muscle to a muscle attachment, and it does not attach to the parietal bone. The frontalis muscle is attached, technically, to the occipital bone, and I can prove it. See it? It's not anchored here. The whole thing is moving from the front to the back because there's a tendon sheet here, the epicranius, connecting the frontalis to the occipitalis. Okay, so the frontalis technically is said to attach to the gallia and to the skin of the eyebrow. Notice that I have a 7 here. That is significant. What is the 7th cranial nerve? The facial nerve. So that's going to become an important feature for us. This is really good news, y'all. All of the muscles of expression that you're about to learn, with the exception of the buccinator, which is considered a muscle of mastication, all these expression muscles of the face that I'm about to name for you are innervated by the same nerve. Now, that's not going to be good enough. If I'm going to know that the 7th cranial nerve innervates all of these muscles, I need to know about that nerve. So now is the time. There's a reason why you learn the cranial nerves. So I'm going to take the cranial nerve 7 off the brainstem. Let's see now. Is there something else that I already know about cranial nerve 7? No? Yeah. Yeah, it's parasympathetic, right? What are the 4 nerves for parasympathetic outflow?
3, 7, 9.
3, 7, 9, and 10. So what you just learned was cranial nerve 7 innervates the muscles of expression on the face. Frontalis is one of them. You already knew that the 7th cranial nerve innervates stuff with autonomics, things that you don't think about. Okay, so I'm going to show you those. So the lacrimal gland, the submandibular and sublingual salivary glands, not the parotid, are innervated by this nerve, cranial nerve 7. There's autonomic, let's see, does this surprise you? There's a nerve now that has somatic motor information on it, 7. Where does the somatic motor information go? To the muscles of expression. This nerve will also have on it autonomic motor information. Surprise you? No, you know this to be true of nerves. What's missing in that? I've taken 2 bundles within my epineurium, 2 places. But what else do you know about nerves? They're not just motor, are they? They're sensory also. Yeah. So as you're learning the branches of the facial nerve, you're actually learning the sensory innervation of the face as well. All the touch and temperature and pain stuff you're learning. If you learn the branches, then you know them. So I'm going to teach them to you. Now, the other one that we're going to learn that innervates, not these, I've deleted, see several muscles that have been deleted here. We'll talk about those on the picture when we talk about mastication. I'm going to tear the jaw down. The masseter, the buccinator, and the pterygoids. We'll look at those muscles that actually help to move the jaws when you're chewing. And the good news is, if you would consider it good news, those muscles of mastication are innervated by the trigeminal nerve. Now, which cranial nerve is that?
4. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 5.
That's 5. Now, when we get to the muscles of mastication, we're going to learn the trigeminal has 3 branches. 3 branches. The ophthalmic, the maxillary, and the mandibular. Passing through. Listen to the holes because you know them. The superior fissure. The foramen rotundum of the sphenoid. And the foramen ovale of the sphenoid. And we're going to take the bottom one on the ovale and run it out to the face, because the mandibular branch is the only one that has somatic motor in it. Okay, so just a preview of what's coming. Now let's learn the muscles here. The orbicularis oculi then is the muscle, the circular muscle around the eyes. It's attached to the frontal maxillary eyelid. You see how simple that description is? Frontal maxillary eyelids. So this is the muscle that helps you close your eyes. Later when we do the eyes, I'll show you the lever palpebrae superioris and the muscles that help elevate the eyelids. But here, the first one is the orbicularis oculi around the eyes. All right, so we work our way down. Now, I mentioned this a moment ago. It's not labeled. I don't require the students to learn. It's just simple. Could y'all name this muscle?
Nasalis.
Yeah, that's your nasalis right there. But this is where we start, the most medial muscle. This is the way I ask it on the first lecture test. Work me out medial to lateral, lateral to medial. Across the top, across the bottom. So medial to lateral here, the first one is the lever labii superioris. The word levator means to lift it. Labii means lips. The labii are the lips. And so you see there's a labii, lips. And there's a labii, lips. Move the lips. So the levator labii superioris is going to move the lip up. The depressor labii inferioris is going to move the lip down. Yes. So this one is attached to the upper maxilla and the nasal bone and to the orbicularis oris. So maxilla and nasal to the lips. The lips here in this case is going to be the circular muscle around the lips, the orbicularis oris, the counterpart of the orbicularis oculi. Then, as we work our way out, the minor's next and the major. This is the most pleasant muscle in the human body. The zygomaticus minor and zygomaticus major attached to the zygomatic bone in the corner of the lip. It's attached to the zygomatic bone and the corner of the lip. When it contracts, what do? Yeah, so it's the most pleasant muscle group in the human body. Zygomaticus minor and major. So levator, labii superioris, zygomaticus minor, zygomaticus major. The next one, this very superficial thin muscle called the rhizorius, is attached to the masseter and the skin of the mouth. Now, you don't know yet, not from me, where the masseter is, but you do know where this muscle is, don't you? How do you know where this muscle is? From the cat, exactly. You know this is the big cheek muscle, right? This big masseter. Now, it's not on this picture because these are the muscles of expression. The masseter attaches to the zygomatic arch and to the body of the mandible. It is this muscle that contracts, moving. It is a mastication muscle. Which cranial nerve is we're going to find innervating the masseter? It won't be 7, it will be 5. Exactly, the mandibular branch of the trigeminal. So The zygomaticus minor and major then, very pleasant. The risorius from the masseter to the skin of the mouth. So in order for medial to lateral, levator labii superioris, zygomaticus minor, zygomaticus major, risorius. Beautiful. Now the orbicularis oris is the pucker kissing muscle. Some would argue this is the most pleasant muscle in the human body. Thank you for your laughter. Appreciate that. And then the platysma. Now, I've taken the skin off of a few faces in my life. The platysma is not an easy one to find. See if this helps you remember. So first is attachments. It's attached to the fascia of the pectoralis muscles. So the major here, the pecs. I say pecs and deltoid. So these are big superficial muscles here in this fascia right here. So this muscle that comes all the way up to your lip, just here. You can see it has an attachment all the way to the corner of the mouth and on the mandible here, and it's been cut on this section right here, is, in my experience, to the human external portions here, what the maximus externus was on the cat. When you tear the skin off, what happens to most of that externus muscle on the cat? It just comes off with it. And that's what happens. It's what happens every time I pull skin off of the chin and then off of the neck here. The platysma comes with. It's very hard to find. It's a very thin muscle with platysma. But it's there. It's a big flat muscle, so needs to be identified. Now let's work our way medial to lateral on the bottom of the lips as well. The first one is the mentalis. And this one goes from the mandible to the skin of the chin. Now, does this description, from the mandible to the skin of the chin, match the picture? Look at it. The mentalis, from the mandible to the skin of the chin, does it match the picture? It doesn't, does it? Where does it look like that muscle attaches? It looks like it goes to orbicularis oris. You see that? But it doesn't. So it's unfortunate the picture looks that way. This is, the mentalis is the pouting muscle. Yeah? Children have perfected the contraction of the mentalis. Yes? They know how to pout. That is a mentalis function, the pouting muscle here. Working my way out lateral, the next one has its counterpart on the top, the depressor labii inferioris. Again, this one goes from the mandible to the lower lip. So it's the counterpart up here to the levator labii, from the maxilla to the orbicularis oris. And then the last one out here that doesn't, well, the zygomaticus muscles are their counterparts, if you will. This is the frowning muscle. This one is called the depressor anguli oris, from the mandible to the skin of the angle of the mouth. So the angles are depressor anguli oris and zygomaticus minor and major. To turn the lips up and to turn the lips down. Okay. Now, let's mention the buccinator here. Well, let's start on this side. The corrugator, sometimes called the corrugator superculi, is the look of concern. This is attached to the arch above the nasal bone to the skin of the eye. And so the skin of the eye would be the skin that's extending here, this fascia and skin that's extending above the orbicularis oris. So this is the look of concern. It's the corrugator superculi and its attachments. And then finally, this one, the buccinator, doesn't fit beautifully on this image because the buccinator is technically a muscle of mastication. We'll talk a little bit more about that whenever I tear the side of the jaw down for you here in just a moment. But it's attached to the maxilla and mandible, so both the upper and lower jaw bones, to the orbicularis oris. Let me ask you, from what you can see here, the buccinator, is its attachment on the maxilla and mandible anterior or posterior?
Posterior.
Anterior or posterior?
Posterior.
Posterior. Now, how do you know that?
Because it's attached back towards the back.
Okay. How else would you know that? If it attaches to the oris, you cannot go further anterior than that, right? So if it's attached to the mandible and maxilla, then those attachments have to be posterior attachments. I'm just illustrating for you why you don't, in so many cases, you don't have to list all the details. If I knew this is attached to the kissing muscle, and I know it's on the mandible maxilla, where is it on the mandible maxilla? It's not anterior on them, it's posterior on them. So we'll just keep doing that over and over again as we go through. So the buccinator is innervated, it's an exception. It's innervated by cranial nerve 7, but it's technically considered a muscle of mastication. I'll say that again. It's a unique one on the face. It's not really an expression muscle like the rest of these are. So what did we get? We got closing my eyes, we got looks of concern, we got smiling, we got kissing. Now you know the names of all of these muscles. And the good news is you know it's innervated by cranial nerve 7, but that's not going to be good enough. Because you already know some things about 7. It's time to clean this up. How does cranial nerve 7 get there? Okay, so can you help me with this? They're not labeled here. So what is the name of this muscle? Platysma. I'm not real sure what that is, but it seems to be in the middle. It goes all the way to the vicularis oris, so it's probably...
Mentalis.
Huh? I don't think so, because see, this one goes all the way up. I think this is either the depressor angular oris, but it's not far enough to the corner for that, so I think that's probably the depressor labii inferior. You see that? Okay, what about this one? What's this one called?
The orbicular oris.
Orbicularis oris. What's that one?
The nasal.
No.
No, it's a major.
No. It goes up to the nose.
The
here.
levator labii.
The levator labii sclerotis. Good. Now these muscles, take me now. Zygomaticus
Inferior.
minor and major. Okay, good. This one we haven't talked about. That's the temporalis. What's this one?
Occipitalis.
Occipitalis. What's that one?
Frontalis.
Okay, so you're learning some anatomy, yes? So these things are innervated by cranial nerve 7. How does it get there? Here it comes. How does cranial nerve 7 get there? It's the nerve of expression, okay? So cranial nerve 7 passes off of the brain. It's a cranial nerve. Now when we get to the brain, I'll teach you the specific locations, all right? But for now, it comes off of the brain, cranial nerve 7 does, and it passes into the temporal bone via the internal acoustic meatus. Are you with me where I am inside the head? It's off the brain. Now it's inside a bone. The nerve is inside the temporal bone in the internal acoustic meatus. Now, as it goes into the internal acoustic meatus, it turns posterior and inferior. It turns back and down. And when it does, it comes out of a hole between the styloid process and the mastoid process of the temporal bone. What is the name of that hole? Good. So it comes out then of a hole called the stylomastoid foramen. And as it does, it's going to give off branches that will supply the muscles of expression. I would expect you to know the names of those branches. And here they are in order. Temporal, zygomatic, buccal, mandibular, and cervical. From top to bottom, the branches of the facial nerve are temporal, zygomatic, buccal, mandibular, and cervical. These are the branches of the facial nerve that do facial expression. The facial nerve, which also supplies some parasympathetic information, we talk about that, supplies somatic motor information to the muscles of expression, passing through the internal acoustic meatus and exiting out of the stylomastoid foramen to do so. Now, in addition to carrying somatic motor information, cranial nerve 7 carries parasympathetic motor information. And it does so in controlling glands. And one of those glands shown here is the lacrimal gland, a gland that is located in the superior and lateral portions of the orbit of the eye. Now, this picture shows you the stylomastoid foramen, in case you had forgotten where that was. This is the exit point for cranial nerve 7. This picture is intended to remind you where this is a sagittal section, showing you the right side of the skull here, the internal acoustic meatus, where cranial nerve 7 is. And now this teaches you that the fibers of these things lead through the internal acoustic meatus and exit through the stylomastoid foramen. Now this should bring some memories back to you. Remember very early on in the semester when I typed things out, I said, look, we're going to get you jump-started. This kind of slide will not continue in this class. Just a few of these to get you started. But then we're going to have to start thinking together instead of me typing all this out for you. So you'll notice that in the presentation as well. It's a mixed nerve with 5 major branches. Can you tell me what they are from top to bottom?
Temporal.
Okay, temporal, good. So I expect you to know this. I just said it. So zygomatic,
Buccal.
mandibular, circle. Very good. So these are the major branches here. Motor functions include facial expression and the transmission of autonomic impulses to the lacrimal and salivary. That's not good enough. There are 3 sets of salivary glands, and they're not all innervated by 7. So the sensory function comes from the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. This I also mentioned just a moment ago. If it carries somatic motor and autonomic motor, then I'm going to expect it to carry somatic sensory and autonomic sensory. So when you learn the motor pathways, you learn the sensory pathways. But I emphasize this one here as a sensory pathway from the tongue. That is a somatic sensory pathway. So here's the reminder of the parasympathetic stuff, and it brings up detail that you need. Notice 3, 7, 9, and 10 shown here. Notice that the information from cranial nerve 7 is going to pass through 2 ganglia. Now before I'm done with the skull, I'm going to return to this. This is done on purpose, y'all. We just keep coming back to it. You know when you came to class today it's 3, 7, 9, and 10. You know what their names are already. You know it was somatic and motor, but today you learned what the muscles are and how the nerve got there. Today you're learning what the glands are that the nerve supplies. And they're in context for the skull bones that we've learned. For example, cranial nerve 7 supplies information, as you can see here, that is not myelinated. Does that surprise you? No. Is that pre or postganglionic? Postganglionic, parasympathetic, unmyelinated information that goes to the lacrimal gland. Where is that gland?
In the lacrimal.
Superior and lateral in the orbit of the eye. Where does its secretions go?
The lacrimal.
Through the lacrimal bone into the nasal cavity. So this is a gland that receives parasympathetic autonomic information. Okay. In addition, cranial nerve 7 supplies another ganglia, which we'll learn later exactly where it is. You can probably guess because of its name, to supply salivary glands. 2 of the 3 sets of salivary glands receive their autonomic motor information from cranial nerve 7. So learn the 3 sets. They are submandibular, sublingual, and parotid. We do this a lot. When I tear the side of the head off, we're going to look at it again. Submandibular, sublingual, and parotid. These are the 3 sets of salivary glands. The parotid, y'all, was already identified in your cap. Some of you asked me, do I need to try to save these glands in the neck? Yeah? Those were the submandibular glands. What cranial nerve goes to them? 7. Yes. Submandibular and sublingual. Okay, now this is a weird one. This is bizarro. Cranial nerve 7 goes right through the parotid gland. Literally through the tissue of the parotid. It does not give it any autonomic information. Isn't that weird? If you do surgery on a parotid gland, you better watch yourself. Because if you tweak the part of the facial nerve in the parotid gland as you're doing the surgery, what happens to the patient? They will not be able to contract the muscles of expression on that side of their head. See how important that is? So the nerve goes right through the parotid gland, the facial nerve does, but it doesn't innervate the parotid. Look at where the parotid comes from. The parotid innervation comes from cranial nerve 9. This is so bizarre. This nerve comes off and goes through the jugular foramen of the temporal bone. We'll learn this later. And then turns and comes up the side in order to get to the parotid gland to cause parotid secretions. So 3 sets of salivaries, submandibular, sublingual, and parotid. Facial goes to, name, 3 glands, 3 sets of glands it goes to. Submandibular, sublingual,
parotid,
lacrimal. Lacrimal, submandibular, and sublingual. This is all facial nerve innervation, and you can get it there. Here's the last one for today. I have shut up. The tongue itself sends sensory information to the brainstem. This is a nervous pathway that I will teach you the details of as we get to the nervous system. You will know what the solitary nucleus of the medulla is. But today you're learning that cranial nerve 7 is carrying information from the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Now, how many nerves, young people, carry sensory information from the tongue to the brain?
3.
3 of them. And you already know their names, so might as well learn them. It's just going to keep coming up. From the anterior 2/3, it's facial. From the back of the tongue, it's glossopharyngeal. From the posterior aspects of the mouth, vagus. 7, 9, and 10. Sound familiar? What else is true of these 3 nerves? They're all parasympathetic motor nerves. And they're all carrying somatic sensory information. Okay, so the first bit here on facial is the anterior 2/3 of the tongue for taste. All right. That's it for expression, mastication on Wednesday. I'll get you a donut on the way out
I already ate. I can't eat it.
if you want one.
Hey, this is your perfect opportunity to tell Kaylee about the good news
Oh, yeah.
that happened in the meeting yesterday.
Yeah.